Hey everybody, this is Petey from the Spinner Rack, and we also have
Calvin Ellis, ready to rock.
today we're going to talk about how do you start your own comic book collection. You're watching the movies, you're seeing this, you're seeing folks with it, you think that you can't get into it. Let's turn to the comic book hero and say, how do you start from in 2025?
The first step in 2025, you're going to need some money.
How much money?
Oh, well, that depends on what type of collector you are, and I divide collectors into two types. You have modern collectors and what I want to call copper age collectors. If you're a copper age collector, you won't have to spend as much money. If you're a modern age collector, you're going to need a job.
So let's start first. Not the one who's going to resell. I want a collection of stuff that I'm
Mhm.
going to reread.
No,
And
forget about Copper Age, modern collectors. These are still collectors.
okay,
So they're not necessarily, when I say collectors, these are not guys looking to buy the book so they can resell it at a future date.
okay.
These are guys who want the books and want a collection. Now, with that being said, all collections are going to be sold. That is an eventuality. Okay, all collections get sold. The collector may die, the collector may run out of room. The collector may fall out of love with comic collecting. There's any number of reasons, but they all get sold. Okay, they all get sold. So just to keep that in mind. There's no collection that doesn't get sold. So whatever you're buying is going to be sold one day. Just may not be sold by you.
All right. So what do you buy first? What do you
Well,
do? Do you try to do
let's
monthly?
say again.
Do you do try to do go to the stores and pick out your favorite books at a first glance? How do you go about it?
Well, I'm thinking. Okay, let's say you watched Daredevil. Okay, you watched Daredevil. You liked Daredevil. You want to read more Daredevil. Okay, fine. Go to your library, get the trade paperbacks. If you just want to read the stories, no problem. You can go there, it's free, and it's not going to be an issue. If you, however, want to have a collection, meaning you want to own them, not just read them, but you want to own them, that's different. But your first step is saving money. And your first step is getting some sort of discount on your monthly comics. So if you're going to the comic store, a lot of times if you have a pull box, you'll save anywhere up to 20% on whatever the comics are. If you do some digging, you'll probably find online sites, or you might even be able to buy directly through previews, and you can save up to 35% in some cases, or in some cases, even as much as 50% on books. And this will help you to save money overall on the modern books that are coming out. If you like Daredevil, you want to read his issues, fine. The modern books come out, no problem. You can save money there. You can keep up with the modern issues, no issue. The It starts to become more expensive if you want to have a complete collection. If you want to start going back, that's where more money comes in, and that's where the two types of collectors tend to differ. Copper age collectors really just want to own a copy. They're not concerned if it's a newsstand copy, direct edition, variant. They're not really concerned about that stuff for the most part. They just want the issue. They want to read it, and their goal is really to have a complete collection. So uh, let's say let's say the person likes Daredevil, but they realize, hey, I don't have the money to get a copy of Daredevil #1.
Hmm.
It's not going to be able to afford that or those early issues, but I can afford the full run of Daredevil starting from volume 2. All right, so they're going to go back, they're going to put that particular collection together, but they're not concerned with getting every era edition, every variant. And so long as they got a complete collection, readable, doesn't necessarily mean every book is in tip top shape. They're fine. That's the proper age collector. Modern age collector, different. Modern age collector will throw down some money for the second printings, the variants. Very very keen on what the condition is. They graded copies. These guys will spend more money.
Hmm.
They will spend more money, and these are collectors that are really coming out of the '90s. The guys who read Wizard, in terms of what the hot books were, what the value of a book was if it was graded, treating comic books more like trading cards, those type of collectors. And they may read the book, they may never read the book, but those are not the reasons necessarily that are driving them to buy it. So if you fall into one of those two categories, that really is going to be where your spending is. Now, you have the wherewithal. it's easy to be in either one of those two categories. You can be in the copper age category.
Hmm.
You've got the wherewithal. You might splurge on a big book here and there, but for most part, you're going to be very frugal about your collection. The modern age guy who has the money doesn't care. Money's no object. He just buys what he wants.
Hmm. Well, let's see. I'm trying to think because it's hard to look at it as a let's see, because when they asked the question, I felt like they're asking to adults or people in their 20s. Let's say not too far, and say in their 20s. Well, what do you say for the kids?
Oh,
Like,
hope your parents have some money.
but would you say like I think for us, for me and my brother, it was like the Marvel origins of Marvel and that sort of thing, and that because I mean, obviously, up until you can go to the store, you're getting your parents are taking you to the comic store, and it's just like Candyland. It's like this is Candyland. So, what books would you say to get the little kids as a parent? The parent kid liked the movie and they want some comic books. How do you direct them to starting their collection?
Oh, good grief. Comics aren't for kids anymore. So, man, that's tough. And I think a lot of, for example, a lot of young boys like the Flash series that was
Hmm.
on CW.
Yeah.
They really liked the Flash series. They loved it, but the comic books overwhelmingly were inaccessible for them. These kids usually read a lot more manga than they read American comics. So I, it's unfortunate, but the dynamic became that they wanted to get the older readers because the older readers spent more money. They tried to make comic books closer to like magazines with the paper and everything in
Hmm.
terms of the paper quality, which were more expensive, but that was to make comic books look more adult, get the adults in, and they really phased out the kids. If you look at Copper Age comics, and if you were to find like an old image of them being on a rack, they were very bright, very colorful. If you look at today's comics, they're all dark.
Hmm.
They're all dark, and dark is supposed to be more serious, more dull. Bright, cheery, that should affect more kids. And so the kids look at them, and kids aren't stupid. Kids know what's for them and what's not. Like the cartoon series Invincible. This season was very popular. When they got to the season finale, it was very popular. People were talking about it to the point, kids, are like, "Hey, can I read Invincible? Where can I get these books?" I mean, it literally. I had copies of Invincible, flew off the shelf. I made easily $2,000 in sales on Invincible, $850 in one day. That's how much money people were spending on it, but a lot of that were kids who wanted to get their hands on these copies of the books. And mind you, these were not cheap books. We're talking 20, 30, 125, $150 issues. But they were still being cleaned up. But those are kids who probably have, folks. And I can tell by the name of the person who bought it, because a lot of them were female names, which means these were moms buying these for the kids.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, it's really tough, man. I don't know. I mean, it's really tough because if you're a kid, you like Spider-Man, I don't know what to tell you because the last time I read the Marvel comics, I don't know if any of that stuff is accessible for kids where they can read it and jump in. And then they always try to do stuff where like, oh, we're going to try to make a kid-friendly comic, but the kids read it and they're like, who is this for? I don't want this. I want the Spider-Man I saw in the movie.
Hmm.
So
Well,
that's pretty tricky. That's pretty tricky.
I guess with the Spider-Man books, with the Spider-Man cartoon, the new one, they have like the way DC used to do a book that's actually um, looks like that comic book, so they can connect.
Hmm.
I think the hard part is, I think when I was a kid, it was more like the Spider-Man on TV was definitely cool, or even the Spider-Man in the Electric Company, and all smaller was cool. And then the comic book was just like this world of everything. It's like, and I
Well,
made an Marvel team up, and I think I had what's that thing? Made the Amazing where Spider-Man is on the side of a building, and the mummy's taking his mummy character looks like the mummy is taking who's that guy? The J. Jonah Jameson out the window, and he's just like just blew. Like I know we were just watching the cartoons, and another friend was mentioning what we had as kids of having cartoons. They weren't exactly like the comic books. We had cartoons and comics, so we always constantly had Spider-Man, old Fantastic Fours. We didn't have the X-Men, but they appeared for two. The originals appeared in the Submariner cartoon, so it was like you got bits of it, and then you got GI Joe and Transformers and Spider-Man and his Amazing Friends, which was a definite mainstay, almost a precursor to what we would see, because Tony Stark made them the Amazing Friends saved Tony Stark, and he made them their hideout. So it's kind of the first Iron Man and Peter Parker connection. So
Yeah, we had to explain it somehow.
so
Well,
you
I'm glad you brought up Spider-Man and his amazing friends because I was going to use that as an example.
know.
Kids, kids aren't stupid. So they know, like, okay, this is just like the cartoon, but they know the cartoon is not based on this comic series. They know the cartoon is based on something else. I
Hmm.
mean, we're watching Spider-Man and his amazing friends. They did one comic book.
Yeah, there's only one.
They did
The
one
only
comic book. As
one.
popular as that series was, they only did one comic book for Spider-Man and his amazing friends. So if you wanted to read, and maybe they did it for these reasons, we're like, hey, if you want to read this, go buy Spider-Man.
Hmm.
Don't buy Spider-Man and his amazing friends, buy Amazing Spider-Man. Okay, and that's what you see. And then when you read that, you realize, oh, this right over here is very different than the cartoon. The cartoon is something else, but these are the real stories. And that's where it goes with the kids. It's like when you try to give a kid, like the kid wants to play with your cell phone, and you try to give him like you try to give the kid some
Oh,
some kiddie phone. It's all thick white with these bells and whistles, and they look at it and they people think like the kids are stupid. The kid looks at it like this isn't a real phone.
yeah,
They take it and they chuck it. They're like, no, I want your phone. They know it's real.
yeah,
So it's no different there. Where okay, if you want to do the stuff where they're like, oh, we got the stuff for the kids. The kids are, you already showed them what the real stuff is. Why do they want this?
yeah.
So if you have I'm trying to say like Pokemon, yeah, if it's like Pokemon or Sonic or something else or Power Rangers for that matter. Okay, those things tend to tack much more closely to the visual media, to the film, the cartoon. The comics tend to be more based on that because that's where these things originated. It's different when it originates with the comic and then it makes the jump to other media.
Hmm.
So, that's something that, would keep in mind to keep in mind. But in terms of if you're a kid and you want to start a comic collection, I mean, I just don't know where to point them. I can't think. I mean, if you look at the Marvel movies, none of that tracks with the comics. None of that tracks. There's no Wong Sorcerer Supreme comic. None of that tracks with the comic books. It just
Hmm.
doesn't. Okay, if you want to buy a comic book that's based on just the animated series for Spider-Man, okay, that's possible. But you're going to also look and say, well, wait a minute. There's these other Spider-Man books here too. Let's check this out. Oh, wait a second. This is the real stuff. This other thing is, this is just a cartoon. I want to read the real stuff. I want to read the stuff where this is the actual Spider-Man, not this guy. And
Yeah.
so that's the other thing. That's the other thing to keep in mind. And, we're kids. We had a we had a definitive line. Okay, we had a definitive line. These were this is Spider-Man. These are the Avengers. This is the X-Men. We're gonna buy this. Oh, Spider-Man and his amazing friends got a comic book. Great. Oh, we're never gonna see another issue. That's okay because we still got the real stuff over here.
Yeah.
But today, I would be very, very challenged as to tell where a kid to start or to tell parents where to start. Probably the best thing would be to buy them like trade paperbacks, see what they like, and then maybe they can get into some series that way if they want to start collecting. But so much, it's just not kid friendly anymore. It's sad to say it's not because these are characters that are created for kids, and they just totally went left on them.
Well, I mean, I think I'm just gonna go before we finish this. Go back and say there is stuff to connect with, as you said. You mentioned Invincible. There are definite trades for Invincible. It could be, a little less less for the kids. But I think the initial storyline before you find out that what. Well, I guess that's in the first arc. But there's that. If you like an Amazing Spider-Man, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, there's a comic book that they're trying to keep along with. So there's a couple things you can look at to go to. I mean, there's so many. If you're as far as the adults, there's so many comic books that were movies, like comic books that movies that were comic books, like Two Guns, A History of Violence. There's just so many you could throw. You used to, at one point you throw a rock and be like, well, that was a comic book property. So but this is a way you can start your collecting. And or if you like a character, I mean, it's the same instance. I think my mother, in well, my father, to say it plainly, he said my father said my mother, cured his dyslexia by, giving him certain books, and she didn't put too much to it. She just said, we go to the movies and see Carpetbaggers. So I was like, oh, I want to read what that book is like. Oh, it was a good one. So, and then she would hand it off, but it wasn't. She said it wasn't about trying to cure anything. She just was giving him a good book, that sort of thing. So, I mean, she already, she read books regularly, but then as she went to the movies, there's a way to do that, and people would do that. So it's like you have your in that way, and and you also pointed out, like Daredevil, picking one character might be the way to go. You don't have to start from a place where you gather all of the comic book stuff at one time, and that's the thing. When you're in an environment, there are different books that people read, or different characters that people like. And the same thing that I mentioned with my brother would have certain books that I would have. I don't think he mentioned of reading some of mine's. Well, he might react to complain, but I would read some of his stuff there too, just to see, oh, this is in the house, let me check this out. So, you have ways to go. You don't have to have what you've seen. Some of us have a collection of a bunch of stuff. You can start small, and then as you start liking stuff, you can start picking up there, but you don't have to have the big, massive collection and look like a comic book store. So don't think of it as you can't get into it. You can just stick with one character and go. So you give them kind of three ways to go. And there's more stuff in there, but definitely three ways to go to start your collection. Any other words?
I was a different type of collector. I'm still like a mixture of both modern and copper, but when I started off pretty much as a copper age collector, but I don't know, where guys were spending more money, I guess, on other stuff. I didn't, so I had the wherewithal to buy more of the books that I wanted. So there was this great Frank Miller Dark Knight Returns hardcover. I don't know if you remember, it was a slipcover.
Hmm.
It was all black. Yeah, I remember it's about $100. And for a lot of guys, that was like, oh, no, 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 it's too expensive. And I was just like, I had a job. I just put the money together. It was minimum wage, but I put the money together and I was able to get that type of stuff. Now, I mean, those things are worth a lot of money, like $400 or $500 at the end of the day. I was just buying it because I liked it
Yeah.
at the time, and I wanted to own it. But definitely appreciated. So that was a really good time where if you just wanted to do it one way, that was fine. But if you had the wherewithal, you could actually buy some of the uh, more high-end items and, build a nice collection. Again, I really do think probably the best way to start is decide what you want. Start with the modern books, get some sort of discount if you can from your comic store or an online store, save money, and, go from there. Do you just want to collect? I mean, again, if you're collecting, my advice again is if you just want to read these stories, you can get them from the library for free. Okay, I go to the library myself to read certain stories for free. Like, let me get these trade paperbacks. I'll do this in the case where I buy certain books for myself and I don't want to read my copies because I want them to stay preserved and I don't want to break anything open. I want them to stay in the plastic in the bed. I will go and get copies from the library and read the library copy so I can still enjoy the stories with and preserve my overall collection. So if you just want to read them, that's, I think, is the best way to go. If you want to collect, see about working on getting those discounts, 10%, 20% off. That'll save you money. So you're not throwing, like, a whole ton of money into it, because it can be comic book collecting gets very expensive very quickly. If you decide to go, whole hog with it very early. but you can do, you can have a discount, read these particular things, see what you like, and then yeah, you slowly but surely build a nice collection for yourself. The last thing that I'll say is every collection gets sold. Every collection gets sold. Doesn't matter. You know, be it death. Uh, Sometimes the guy's getting married. I need to make money. I don't have room for them. And the one thing that I will note is the guy who has a really nice collection and I can give him a good bit of money for it. It's always nice to see the shock on their face when they like, I can get how much money? And these guys were just collecting it but they collected well, they collected very strong series, they got nice stuff. It definitely enhanced the value of their overall collection. Same thing when I'm buying it from in any case. People are always happy with that. Though the other side of that is when I see guys and they think they have a collection that's worth, they bought all of the 90s stuff. They bought, all the chromium covers and uh the early image stuff with all the variants. And then when you tell them like, look, this is, worth pennies on the dollar in certain cases, you see this, just to see them so crestfallen. So if you are going to collect, hey, be very circumspect about your collection and really try to build a collection. Don't just build a collection, oh, well, it's for me, because somebody else is going to have to deal with this later on. Try to put some value into the collection. Okay, that is also something that I would advise for the guys. I'm not telling you to go out and buy every variant cover or anything of that nature, but try to put some value into the collection because it is going to be sold one day. And if it's not for you and somebody else is doing it, it's nothing. I really do like seeing that look on people's faces when they realize, oh wow, this actually has some value. This wasn't just some stray item, and it's almost like you were collecting for them as opposed for just yourself.
Okay. Thank you for that, and definitely check out. Start your collection right now if you haven't started, and don't think that it's just a club that you can't get into. Anyone can get into it at any point. You
Yeah,
might find.
you can start with X Force. I think that's X Force 23, the first appearance of Duke.
Oh God, this
Get
guy.
that Duke.
All right, who's going to supposedly appear in the Avengers movie? The last person we should see in the Avengers movie, but since Kamala Harris, because Kamala Harris, Kamala Khan has X ties, then we're gonna get Dupe in there. So, ready, set, spinner rack.
Yo, we're out.
We are out.